Hi, welcome to Executive Points of View. I'm Joe Markey, and I'm here with my co-creator, Grant Shee. We're going to be talking today about finding talent, hiring talent, interviewing talent. I think it's a timely topic. It's a big topic. And so, Grant, I'd like to kind of kick it off to you for a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Appreciate you bringing this up. I do think it's very important. Obviously, talent and the ability to acquire and retain that talent is really what defines an organization or a team's success. And at the end of the day, we can have the best technology and processes, but it's still people that drive these things. It's
That's right.
people that matter. It's the relationships that you have. And so when it comes to assessing the right talent for an organization, I think there's some probably what I'll call disturbing trends or observations that you and I have both had.
Yes.
The first of which is, I think we're now in a period of time where we see more jargon in resumes and different certifications and different words and initials and acronyms, as opposed to real experiences, as opposed to taking the time to sweat through working sessions and workshops and people getting their hands dirty. So what are your thoughts on that observation?
I do. I mean, I would characterize it somewhat as resume stuffing. From my perspective, I remember there have been multiple schools of thought regarding how you interview people, and I started out during the stress interview, so that I kind of lived towards the end of the stress interview, and then I think thankfully we've migrated away from that. But at the same time now we moved into behavioral interviewing, where you have very formal training. I remember being trained on, have the interviewee talk to you about specific experiences that they had and see how they handled different types of stressful situations in their own words and in real life type examples. And I always found behavioral interviewing to be a really good approach on trying to learn as much as you could from a candidate in a very condensed period of time that you have with them. But now what I've noticed is very few people are trained in behavioral interviewing. And then you add the complexities of post-COVID world where you are on the phone or on Zoom trying to interview someone. And one of the things I've seen is people behave very differently. Candidates that perform very well on the phone, and I don't know if they have Google on the side, you ask a question, they're Googling for something. I don't know what's causing this, but I see candidates perform very differently from phone interviews to video interviews to actually in-person interviews. And then the other thing is, how do you gauge some of these more subtle things like cultural fit, self-start, things like that are so important to the success of a candidate?
Yeah, you bring up some really good points, Joe. I think one of the things I want to dig into a little further is you brought up you were trained in the art of interviewing. And I'm not sure we as a industry or an organization unit today do as much of that as we need. And I think it's so important. Obviously, you might be a great manager, CISO, leader for your team or your organization, but if you aren't given the tools and the expectations of how to ask questions, what to listen for, how to follow up, how to dig in to someone's true character. I think that's what you're alluding to, right? It's not so much the competency or the technical skills, it's the character. So in a world now where we have to depend more and more on remote employees, where we have to depend on people being self-starters and self-motivated, what are the types of questions and anticipated responses that are going to lead us to those candidates or those resources or people that are going to exhibit those qualities for our organization in the best way? And so I think that training component of not just assuming, hey, he or she is a good leader, therefore they can staff a team or build a team, but I think organizations taking the time to say, here is how effective interviewing works. Here is how, here are the types of questions to ask and the responses that come back and what you should do with that.
And I think that too many times, I think in corporate America, we just leave it in the hands of the hiring manager without any tools. You say, you're a good CISO, you're a good CIO, you're a good CTO, so you know what you're hiring for, and you're going to go and get what you need. And many times, you wind up doing it from experience. You say, I know what a good engineer looks like. I'm going to go and try to hire for that. But many times you are not presented with the newer tools, the newest methods of being able to discern the characteristics of who you're trying to hire in a modern world. I remember every few years a new paradigm on interviewing came out, and I've been somewhat missing that in the sense that I haven't seen a new paradigm in how we assess potential new talent, new employees, and a deeper understanding of workforces and what are the new workforces that are coming our way, like the millennial workforces. We have to understand these new workforces that are coming into the
Yeah, for sure. We've evolved our interviewing tools and capabilities. And so now we can do things via video. We have telepresence. We have different ways to connect with people and hear from them. But I think to your point, the types of questions that we're asking or the ability for us to interpret responses, I'm not sure has evolved as quickly as the technology behind those different interviewing tactics and forums. So probably something we need to do. Speaking of that, can you let our listeners know something that you think might be an immediate change that organizations or individuals doing interviews could do today that's reflective of where we are as a society?
I mean, I think that we should, a couple of things. I think offhand, I always think about in the intentional act of hiring. I think, and you and I have spoken about intentionality and being intentional in your actions and what you're trying to accomplish and where you're trying to go. So I think the act of hiring needs to be an intentional act of saying, what am I looking for? What traits am I looking for? How do I assess those traits in an interview process? And how am I going to make sure that I get those? And I think many times, I think we come from somewhat similar backgrounds, but we value certain things as saying, I value, consistency in work performance. Whereas, depending on the role, you might need somebody who's quite a bit more creative. You say somebody who's consistent but not creative might not be successful in a certain type of role. And so we need to understand, what are we looking for in the talent that we're trying to hire, and then how do we bring those people in and then be able to provide them what they need in order to be successful. And I think that kind of brings me to my second point of, aside from intentionality, I think we have to somewhat understand that some of our younger workforces that are coming in, they solve problems in fundamentally different ways than we used to solve problems. And I think that many times we are too regimented in corporate America of saying, this is the way it's been done, and therefore this is the way we are going to continue to do it. And I think that there is value in some of that consistency, but I think we lose the bigger picture if we are unwilling to assimilate some of these newer mechanisms or newer tools that our workforces are coming in to solve. And I think academia, to an extent, is training some of our workforces, but I think we used to work computers and laptops and technology and things of the sort. The newer workforces that are coming in, they live and breathe it, and they just fundamentally approach problems differently.
Yeah, I think to your point, there used to be a series of things that were akin to a checklist, right? Did they come from an Ivy League school or an educational background that was well known? And while those things are definitely still viable and have certain connotations, I think, given where we are as a society in our world, we've got to dig a little deeper to say, if someone exhibits the right traits or characteristics and they did not have that formalized education or that degree, but they had the experience or they had the ability to operate efficiently in a chaotic environment, that to me is just as valuable as the fancy school degree or the pedigree from an education standpoint.
I think that's a great point. I've always looked at, from a hiring perspective, if somebody completed a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, what I see is somebody, it's not really a measure of intelligence or capability, it's really a measure of somebody who was able to work through a program. It doesn't necessarily tell me much else about the person specifically, especially as more time goes on. So I don't know who you became 20 years after you got your bachelor's degree, but if that's all I have to measure you, then it does show me that you were able to accomplish something. And at the same time, I think we have a lot of people that are coming in there in our workforces who are accomplishing great things. And even though we are seeing a lot of resume stuffing happening, there are certain long-term program experiences that I think are not being injected into resumes correctly. I would really value knowing if somebody went through an ERP implementation or through a particular program, even if they don't have an undergraduate, if they completed a long multi-month or multi-year program with their company, that tells me a lot about them.
Yeah.
But then there are also the sides of things that, in certain roles, being able to do smart little chunks of work is what's preferred. So you have to make sure that you value the right things.
So just bring this full circle. It sounds like we're seeing or observing a resume stuffing phenomenon, but that might be because we as hiring people are looking for kind of the easy way out, right? I'm looking for a certain set of acronyms or degrees or background that, quote unquote, quickly summarizes, to your point, what that represents or their skill set that represents, instead of doing the legwork of digging in and hearing someone's narrative, hearing someone's experiences and background. And so it's twofold. The candidates or the talent out there have to do a better job, a more mature job of articulating their story. Yes. But we, in organizations who are in those positions, need to do a better job of listening and knowing what to dig into and what to ask for as we fill out our roles.
And I think tools providing, not leaving it just to the hiring manager unassisted. I think that there is definitely a role from an HR perspective of saying, what is the hiring paradigm? How do we hire the talent that we need to hire in order to make our organization successful? And I think it ties back to quite a few of the other topics we talked about around, organizational design, speed. What kind of organization are you trying to build? And are we staffing for that organization or bringing the right talent into the force?
So thank you, Joe. As usual, rich set of discussion points here. That's all the time we have for this episode, though. Thank you all for listening to Executive Points of View.
Thank you all.